just a few minutes here, Elizabeth, to wait for people to kind of come into the session. But if you are in the session, tell us where you're coming in from, and tell us have you been a guest on somebody else's podcast? And what was your favorite podcast to guest on?
Absolutely, I'd love to hear that.
Elizabeth, if you have an answer to that question, go ahead and check us out.
Let's see. Let me think back through all the 100.
Ooh. Lena says from Austin, Texas, she was on a Freedom and Liberty podcast. Danielle coming in from Spokane.
Awesome. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate it.
Win the Hour, Win the Day podcast. It's Elizabeth. Out of 100. So that's very prestige.
Yep. It was one of the best. I've had some really bad ones.
Well, we won't ask you to name those.
Actually, I don't even remember them. They were that bad. Like, I don't even remember them to name them. I just know that they were the bad ones.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get started. I know more people will be joining us as we go. It's just how it is with this format. But to introduce the birthday lady here, we have Elizabeth Pampaloon from Absolute Marketing. She is the founder of that. She can take a whole year of marketing and cram it down into a day or a week or a few days.
A day. Yeah, it's a year of marketing in 5 days.
In 5 days, you can have your whole marketing done for the year. So that she's a wizard in that way. And the reason she is here on our summit today is because in 2020, she had this crazy idea. Let's get on 100 podcasts as a guest. And so that, I mean, if you're doing the math, if you take Christmas and Thanksgiving out, that's 2 a week. That's pretty insane. And she was doing this all herself, and it made a lot of difference in her business, which I'm sure she'll talk about as well. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of kind of her processes of guesting, what the do's and don'ts of that, and all of that. So if you have questions on guesting, this is the session to do it. So Elizabeth, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And I want to say that I was actually on 100. That was my goal, and I did achieve that. But I was actually on over 100, almost 140. And by the time I was done, some of them is still not even aired yet. There's that many of them that were like backlogged and everything.
Wow.
So not only did I do the 100, but I also did 65 of my own episodes last year as well. So tons and tons of those. But my name is Elizabeth Pampalone, and I am the owner of Absolute Marketing. And I love it. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and I've been doing marketing and websites for, I'd say going on, well, I've been websites for 20, but I've had my business for 15. So definitely a long time. So I've seen a lot of things, probably more than most people would care to see when it comes to marketing. But I've seen one thing was, I started podcasting in 2015. So I actually started a lot, sooner than, most people are just kind of getting into it because of COVID. But I started it way back then. And what I found was that my idea of podcasting was that I'm a perfectionist, so is a lot of people. And so I would try and do these amazing, beautifully edited things, and I couldn't. And it would take up so much of my time, and it would take up so much of my energy. And I would make these great hour-long interviews with people, and I would spend all this time doing that. Then I would try and go back and edit. I made my own commercials. I did my own, because I used to be in radio. I was on the radio when I was 12, and I was a DJ. And so I knew how it should sound. I knew what that crispness was. I knew what those cuts should be like. And when I couldn't achieve that on my own, because it was just too time consuming, I just gave up. I'm like, forget it. And then when in January of last year, so before the whole COVID thing, I was like, you know what? I need to pick podcasting up again. I don't know why. I just had this wild hair, and I thought, I'm just going to pick podcasting up. but I knew I had to do it in different terms. And so when I started my own podcast, I actually said, I can only do 2 minutes. Like that's the limit of my, attention span or whatever. And so when I started the 2-minute podcast, I was just me, literally, and this is mostly still me, just talking into my phone as the microphone. I didn't have all this fancy equipment. I just used my phone, voice memos, recorded 2 minutes of me talking about some tip or some subject matter, put it into Ala2, which is one of my favorite programs, and then let them do most of the voice editing and all of that fancy, mixing and all that stuff. Let them do that part, tack on some music beginning and end, tack on my intro and outro, and then send it over to Captivate. Like that's my podcast. And it was 2 minutes. And I thought, if it's going to catch on, it's going to catch on. If not, I've got a ton of content out there. Sounds good. So I started doing that. And then when COVID hit, I lost basically all my revenue for my business because I was doing networking. I am the queen of networking. I do a lot of experiments, if you don't notice, but I networked 3 times a day for a year in 2012 and 2013 between those 2 years. And then I ended up running 13 groups a month for 2 years after that. So I do a lot of experiments, but I do them for weird, random reasons. So like the networking was to become the most well-known person in my city. I did that. I accomplished that within that year of networking 3 times a day, like a crazy person. But I also made that part of my business. Like it was how I got my clients. And then when COVID hit and all of that was taken away from me, and I was only networking 3 times a week at that point, I was like, how do I replace this? How do I change and go from being out there almost every single day or every other day in my business in the, out in the world, to being at home? And even though I'm a digital marketer and I do things online, my version was more hybrid, right? So I ended up just saying, how do I get this one-to-one connection that I get in networking? And how do I get the one-to-many connection I get in networking? Like, where is that? And I was like, duh, it's in podcasting because I can have a conversation with a podcast host and just have a great in one-on-one, but then I can also reach their audience, which is my one-to-many connection. So that was a huge, huge thing for me to just go, oh, light bulb, perfect. And I had already started my podcast several months before that. But I knew if I just was like, I'll be on podcast, it was just going to kind of fizzle out. And it would be on the last thing on my to-do list. It would be at the end of the day. I'd go, oh, yeah, I was going to do that today. I'll do it tomorrow. It was just one of those things that would get thrown off the list eventually. And so I thought, you know what? I don't want that to happen with this. I want it to be a real thing. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to really do it. So I made the goal of being on 100 by the end of the year. And so this was March when I started. And I ended up having to apply for 400 to be on 140. So the return was okay-ish, but the applications were hell. It was awful. I mean, that was like the worst part of the whole thing. But I'm going to give you some tools that I learned along the way so that you can do this much easier than I did. So I have a couple questions in here. So what were you doing? What were you advertising during your own commercials? Oh, for my old podcast, I was advertising future episodes of my podcast because I knew what I was going to be talking about because I already had 2 or 3 interviews, that I had done. And so I knew which order I wanted to put them in, and I would actually advertise for future episodes. And then I would do crazy commercials. I might actually put some of them into my podcast. You guys have given me a cool idea. I'll go back and find some of them and I'll try and put them in my podcast, because I was doing like a Halloween episode and like Christmas episodes and like all kinds of crazy stuff during that. So yeah, I'll bring them out and show you guys. I'll put those in as little Easter eggs for you guys in my podcast. So you'll have to subscribe and listen. Let's see what else. Any other questions? How would I go about using my strategy to get more podcasting clients? So I actually work with a podcasting company right now. They do guest connections, basically. And they're not a directory per se, but they have a directory. So it's very interesting about getting podcasting clients. Because so much of this is done for free, it's very difficult to sell someone on any kind of podcasting management or any kind of services around podcasting, because it is seen as a free industry. And so I find that if you're going to sell someone around that, you have to really market the heck out of it. And you really have to have a solid message behind what you're trying to sell. So I'm going to show you one actually going to share my screen really quickly and show you some of the tools that I use. And let me pull the right. Yeah, that's it. So if you guys would be able to, hold on, see my screen here. I'm going to show you the first tool that I use. This is the radioguestlist.com. So, and I'm actually going to try one thing. Hold on a second. I'm going to pop this out so I can still see the chat and everything while I present my screen. So let me just do that really quick. All right. So there we go. Perfect. All right, let me share it again. There we go. All right, so share that. Perfect. So if you guys should be able to see my screen here in just a second. All right, perfect. There it is. So you can see it's radioguestlist.com. I don't know if any of you guys have signed up for this yet. It is free. They have a free level, and I highly recommend this. This sends you an email every day, every couple of days, sometimes once a week, with people who are looking for guests. You can also get on their information so that you can say, hey, I'm looking for a guest and I would want my podcast to be promoted through the email service. And so I loved this email because it was a way for it to just drop in my inbox, and I didn't have to do any outreach on this part. They sent me the people and I would apply for the ones that I thought were relevant. So definitely a really easy, quick, free thing that you can do. Another one that I signed up for is Matchmaker FM. I don't see if it'll go off the login page. This was a great one as well. There's you can start for free here. I think I still have a free account with them. I haven't paid for this one. It allows you to connect directly with the people that are running podcasts through their system. They have a little inbox system. It's a great way to collaborate. What I found, though, there's a little loophole with this. So if you're really trying to get on a lot of podcasts, and this has a great, listing of people who are quality hosts that are looking for guests, you can actually go around this a little bit. So they allow you to connect with, let's see, like 20 or 30 or something like that per month. Okay, or maybe it's 15, I can't remember. But they allow you a certain amount per month. But if you see more that come through, because they send you emails as well, it's like, oh, that one would be good. Oh, that one would be good. You don't want to miss out on just not going on a podcast because you don't have any more credits left to send in messages, right? So what I would do, and I would have my assistant do this too, I would send them the thing and we would actually look at it and we would look at what the podcast was. Like this one says The Light Inside, like that's one of the podcasts listed here. So we would go on Google, type in The Light Inside podcast, either find the website or this guy's website, right? Whatever the person who is the host. And then we would either look for an application on their website or on their personal site. And if that wasn't there, I would literally just email my pitch through their contact form, kind of like cold calling them a little bit. And you would be surprised how many of those actually got me through. There's so many of those that actually got through. And if I really, really wanted to be on a podcast, maybe it was somebody I was like, this is like the holy grail of podcast. I have to be on this one for my industry, whatever it was. Excuse me. If I really, really, really wanted to be on one, I would use a multi-channel approach. So I would say, go to their website, do their application, contact them through their contact form, not the same pitch, but like, hey, I just applied. I'm so excited. Would love to speak with you. Even if we don't do the podcast, I still want to talk with you, that kind of thing. Then I would go on their LinkedIn and I would message them through there. And you might think this is overkill, but it really wasn't for people who they only look at certain channels sometimes. They only accept submissions through certain directions. And I've actually had a couple people who had said to me, I almost didn't interview you. And one person said to me actually a couple of days ago, she goes, I almost didn't interview you. You've been on too many podcasts. And I was like, oh, how dare you? I have worked hard for that. And she said, no. But when I looked at your pitch and I realized I needed to look at your website to really determine if I really still felt that way. She's like, I went to your website, just my business website, just my personal one. And she's like, your brand is so strong that I knew I had to interview you. So definitely don't rule out, just because if you don't think you have a good pitch or whatever. I actually, part of my pitch says, I'm your best guest ever. That's part of my pitch. So I'm really putting myself out there like, hey, I'm the best. And if you want the best on your podcast, I've been on over 100 of them. So 1, I know what I'm doing. 2, I'm going to be a great guest because I've been a guest a million times. And 3, I'm going to have the best subject matter you've ever had on your show. And I'm just being super bold about that. And I think certain people take me up on that, but then the ones that don't, I don't know that they don't, they just don't contact me, right? They don't write me back, right? So, but I do like this one a lot. But like I said, if you really, really want something, make sure you're using a multi-channel approach. It really helps. Let's see. Elias says he's booked some individuals on projects from contacts forms. And a tip is to copy and save the pitch in your email as a backup just in case. Oh, I totally do that all the time. I have notes on my computer and I just go back to my notes and I have them listed as this is my podcast pitch note and this is my, podcast bio and all that. So I'm actually show you what my website looks like. This is my site here. I have a listing for podcasts. So that's my podcast that I do as a host. And so here's that. And I do use Captivate. So this is through Captivate. and there's some of my reviews there. And then it says you can hear me on other podcasts. So I have all my podcast things that I've been on as a guest listed in my blog. So that's there as well. But one of the things I did early on, I did this about 20 or 30 in once I'd gotten on several. And I realized they were all asking me for the same information. And I was like, do I really have to send you my photo again? Do I really have to send out my bio again? Like the same stuff over and over and over and over. Now, there are some people that do their forms, I would say in a smart way, which I don't really think is smart from my perspective. They'll actually put you have to put your photo here and you have to like Google Docs. Yeah, Google Forms, right. And like you have to put your photo here and it's required. And you have to put your LinkedIn link here and it's required. Oh, those are the worst. The best ones that are ones that say, email me this stuff, send me this stuff. So what I did was I made an entire web page just for them. Everything I've ever been asked to give to a podcast is here. So my short bio, which is what they usually introduce me by, my logo, my headshot, they have several to choose from, my website link, my free membership link, my free Pro Toolkit link, all of the socials that I use, the topics that I cover. If they want to view all my topics or questions to ask me, they're all listed here. And then maybe they already have their own booking system. That's fine. They can send that to me. I'll book through there. But if they don't, which I've run through podcasters who don't have their own booking system, they can either book a chat to say, hey, I want to check you out before we talk for real. Or if they're like, I'm ready to just book with her, but I don't have my own link, they can book a podcast recording, which is just an hour-long meeting here, and I will, pull it up on my system and they can record it or whatever. So this has saved my life millions of times. So actually, whenever I apply to a podcast, I send this link with it. And I'm like, this is everything you need. If you're ready to go, I'm ready to do this. Let's just do it. So, yeah, the podcasters directory has similar stuff. Yeah. So definitely I like making it on my own site because I have been in a lot of directories as well that has all this info. But this is in my website. So I can control this within my website. This is a page within my site. So it's not its own separate website. It's not its own separate page or anything like that. But this is actually a page in my site. So I have the right branding on it. I can put anything I want on it. I can change it around, etc. So I definitely recommend this to anybody who's looking to be a guest on podcasts because it just saves you and them so much time. And what I've been told is you're a pro because you do this. You're a pro because you have everything together. I didn't even have to ask you for anything and it's just here. All right. I don't know which question is for me. Some of them look like they're for other people. So well, I wasn't sure if someone was asking about the podcast directory. Are you asking me, Lena, how I get paid? Let's see here.
Yes, she is.
Okay. So how I get paid. So I actually have a marketing agency and I use these podcasts to actually get the word out for my marketing agency instead of networking while we were kind of locked down in COVID. So I still am going on 2 or 3 a week. But I'm not like forcing it like I was. They're just kind of coming to me and I just apply like when I see the ones that I think are interesting, but I'm not doing like that heavy hardcore podcasting like thing like I was doing like applications like I was before. But I definitely recommend this if you're even thinking going on a few. But I have a marketing agency. That's how I really get paid. And then everything I do here, everything I'm talking about today is what I use for marketing. So when I approach marketing, I believe that you should not have, just all of your marketing eggs in one basket. Like you shouldn't just put it all in on social media and be like, that's my marketing, I'm done. Like I believe you should have a strong brand, a website that converts, social media that connects to your website and produces more information and more content for your brand. And then having email marketing and blogging that also refer back to your website and that help to get that message out there. Mm-hmm. And then if you're really impassioned and you really want to do it more and you're kind of in that stage of business, you can use a podcast to make more content and utilize that to make a blog and kind of use those pieces together. And then also have a membership on top of that. I have a free membership. You all are welcome to join. It's at the bottom of my website right here. But I like to use all those pieces and say 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, right? Diversify it rather than just saying, oh, I'm just doing a podcast. That's where my money's coming from. Like I need to make sure that I'm diversifying all of that. Plus I do in-person networking. Plus I speak a lot. And I'm putting a little bit into each thing. And I know I seem a little more scattered than some other marketing approaches like, oh, I'm all funnels or oh, I'm all social media. But really what I'm doing is I'm hedging all my bets. I'm making sure that if the social media isn't pumping that month, that my speaking is. And if the speaking isn't pumping right now, then maybe my podcasting is. And if my podcasting isn't pumping, so everything is working together. But if some things aren't performing as well, I try and figure out why they're not performing. Maybe it's just a season or a timing thing. But it also may just be that more effort was put in over here or more effort was put in over there. So I want to make sure that I try and love all my children equally and that they're all well taken care of. But I try to make sure that they're all diversified as well, because any minute, any of us could be kicked off social media. Any minute, our podcast could be kicked off of Apple iTunes. It doesn't matter what we do or what we don't do or say or don't say. So I believe that if you're diversified, you'll always have that email list. You'll always have your website. Those are kind of my bookends. And then everything in the middle is more fluid. If things come and go, great. If not, then I'll keep using them. Let's see. Any other questions?
Awesome. Just a lot of great feedback. They're loving this.
Awesome.
I do want to point out, you're talking about, the content machine of a podcast. We do have a session specifically on that tomorrow with Amy Woods. It's 10x her content. We'll talk about repurposing all this. So then when you are getting, and this could probably be a good topic for you to get into, Elizabeth, is when you guest on somebody else's show, obviously you're getting that content for them, but you should be getting the content as well. What do you ask for from them after you guest?
So I honestly, and this is probably one of the worst things you can do, I don't ask them for a lot, because a lot of times what I found is that either they're on top of it and they will send me things for my own marketing. They'll say, here's the graphic we made. They'll say, here's the raw cut. They'll say, whatever, here's the link, whatever that is. Out of the 100 and so that I've done, 140 or whatever, I have probably, I know that some of them have been lost. I actually had to go back and hey, where's my podcast guy? Like that kind of thing. Yeah. And so I know a couple of them actually got corrupted. Some of them got deleted. Some of them they were like, I don't know, the file's gone. Like that happened because I was on so many. But then there were some people who they weren't going to be good at marketing it anyway. And I could see that even before we recorded, but I was on a mission. So I was like, whatever. Yeah. But I could tell also the ones that had, I would go and look them up when I go to apply. I'll look up their social. Do they have other podcast listings? Are they doing this weekly? Are they doing this monthly? How many episodes do they have? Even if it's 30 or 40, how consistent are they? Excuse me. So I try to make sure that before I even apply now, because before I just, like I said, I wasn't discriminating. I make sure that they're at least going to have some kind of graphic or something, which means I know they're promoting it on purpose. So I try to only go on those types now. But before, I didn't ask for anything. I said, when's it going to air? And then I would at least know, and I had it in my calendar. And I actually made myself a spreadsheet. I'll show you part of one of my spreadsheets. I have like 3 or 4 right now, but let's see. Here it is. This spreadsheet is what I created with all of the information, like where I actually was, what the title was, what the episode or what the show name was, and then if it was when it was published, what the interview date was, if I knew that, because some of them I didn't, and then if it was audio or video or an article, because some of those are in here, and then if I have like a logo for them, and then the actual link to the actual episode, if it was a podcast or if it was on YouTube or whatever. But see, like this one here, there wasn't any, like they didn't do any graphics or anything. But then I think the one below it, this one they did. And you can clearly see the difference in the two. If I just hover over it, like that was just me in a video. It was just blah, yeah. There it is. But this one actually has like the image, and they took my photo and they put like my green, and so they did a little bit more for it. And so that's the kind of stuff that I look for when I was looking for new podcasts to be on. And then the way I separate them is, this is just from this year. So these are the ones I've been on this year that have actually aired. And then the ones all down here are ones that I've been on that have not aired yet, or that were from last year that are missing in action. So that's how I kind of keep track of everything, and just in a simple spreadsheet. And then I love this thing right here. I don't know if you guys have seen Podlink. You can get this for your thing as well, for your podcast. It's just called pod.link. And it gives you this really cool thing that shows you all of your podcasts episodes, and it gives you availability of where it's available. And I didn't put this together. You don't even have to sign up for it. You literally can just look up Podlink. Like, you just click on it, you type in the name of your podcast, and boom, and they give you your link. And so I thought that was super cool. And then you just copy the link of the actual website, like up here at the top, and that's your link, and you can just use it for whatever you want. And so when people say, "Oh, what's your podcast?" I have a little short link or whatever that I use for this, and you just go to Podlink, and I just copied mine in there. So just do marketing, absolute marketing, and then it just pops up like that, and you click on it, and then there's your link. So it's pretty neat. But I like to use this when people are like, well, where do I find it? Like, I don't have an iPhone, so how do I get it? I don't know all the things it's on. It's just out there because it gets put out through these services and stuff. So I'm just like, hey, here's all the links you could ever want. But that's a pretty cool little tool. And then, of course, I have my website they can go to as well. So let me also show you this one. This is podcastguests.com. And this is a great one. This is free as well. There's also a $9 version, which I would highly recommend. You can be in their directory, which is pretty cool. And then I'm a member as well. So I actually pay the $9, and they send me an email. It's like every day. It's every day or every other day, I think. It's more than the radio guest list one. And this email is so impressive. They send you a list of the people who are looking for shows, and then they send you, or you can actually apply to them like through that email. So you click on, apply now or whatever for that show. Like, you're like, yeah, this would be one I'm interested in. And then it actually takes you to a standardized Google form. Okay, standardized Google form. And I have all of that information in a note on my computer. So when I pull up the Google form that they have and my note, I'm literally just name, copy, paste, email, copy, paste, bio, copy, paste. Like, it's my pitch instead of my bio. And then they're like, they ask a question. What do you have a podcast? If so, what's the name? I'm like, copy, paste. And then they say, are you going to promote this on what platforms are you going to promote this on? And I have a thing that says web, social, email, and I copy it and I paste it. And then it asks you if you have a podcastguest.com directory listing, and it's some weird link that I don't memorize. And so I just copy and paste it. So when I go to apply for those, I open like 20 tabs because I've opened a bunch of them up. And then I just literally go through each one and paste my name across all of them. And then I go through all of them again and paste my email. And then I go through all of them and paste. And it makes it so fast that I've gotten so used to doing it. But they're standardized form, which is super cool. And I love that about them because you don't have to wonder, what am I sending? How am I sending it? All that stuff. So it's really neat.
That's so cool. And the $9 a month, is that to get the email a daily, or what's that?
It gets you more listings. So the free one is just like 5 or 6 listings, and then if you do the $9 or whatever, I don't remember where it is in here, but then you get like more listings than just that. So excuse me. I did a presentation earlier today, so like my voice is starting to go. Let's see here. I don't think it's listed on here. I mean, you have to like do the sign up, and then they have like an upcharge thing, like, oh, if you want to do $9 for more or whatever. But at least do the free one to start, and then go back and be like, $9, cool, you know. Awesome. So Matchmaker FM is good. I'm going to close this tab. Podcastguest.com, one of my faves. And then radioguestlist.com. So another free one. I'm going to show you one now that's not free. And the reason it's not free is because it's kind of the best service ever. And if you're at this point, you just need to do this, because this is where I am now. And this is pretty much what I do now, because I did the whole, like, did it the hard way for like so long. Yeah. This is the Pod Scout, and they're amazing. And so I used them towards the end of my journey, like towards the end of my little journey of like getting on all these podcasts. But what they do is they basically get a questionnaire from you, and then they apply to 35 podcasts a month, 100 podcasts a month, or 210 podcasts. I mean, this is over, 3 months or 6 months, but like, it's like 35 a month on average, right? And the thing I liked about them was I didn't have to do any of the work. I gave them my information one time. And of course I have it already. So it's like, yeah, it's done. But I just gave it to them. I'm like, these are the kind of podcasts I want to go on. And I gave them my list of all the ones I've been on. So like, don't reapply me to these, because I've already been there, done that. I don't want to be like, oh, we already had her on, you know? Yeah. So they do all the research. They do all the applications. And the best thing is they apply as me. So it's more like an assistant kind of thing. But they're really good at picking which podcast you should be on. And then you just get the applications back into your inbox. So it's really, really cool. And like I said, this is not the free route. It's kind of like, once you're at that level where you're like, I want to be on podcasts, I want to be on good ones, then this is when you move to something like this. So for example, I mean, if you think about it, one of my podcasts that I was on netted me a $15,000 deal. So for me to pay this per month is like nothing compared to that. So I know that when I go on a podcast, I can sell something indirectly, right? Like, I'm not selling in this presentation, but I'm at least like indirectly going, hey, this is what I do for a living. This is how it affects you. This is how it would be great. So this would be something that I would recommend for people who are like at that level where they're like, I'm running my masterminds, I'm doing retreats, I'm doing all these other things, but I also need to get on this podcast as well. So
awesome.
Any questions that we've got tonight? Any other questions?
So go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A. If somebody asks a question that you like, you can upvote it and I'll see it more prominently. I do have some questions as people are thinking here. One is, obviously you've been on a ton of podcasts, that goes without saying at this point, but how do you know which ones now are worth your time versus those that, before you even apply? Because there's going to be people that are like, oh, I accept you, but now I think like you might not be worth my time. So how do you know before you even apply?
Well, like I said, I look at their social media and see if they're up to date with it, if they're keeping up with it. And I also look at how are they getting that podcast out there? Is it on their LinkedIn? Is it on their website? Can I easily access it? Is it something that they promote in a blog post? Do they repurpose any of their content? Because I'm big on repurposing. So I definitely want that to be a factor for them, because I know that means they're going to give me good content after the fact as well. Mm-hmm. So they're going to make up those little audiograms, or they're going to do a video or whatnot. So the other thing is, if I listen to a podcast, which when I was doing the 100, I didn't listen to any of them. And that's why I got on a few bad ones. But because I was doing so many. But now I'll like listen to a little snippet of it and be like, do I want to be on the podcast with this person's voice? And I know that might sound a little bit like superficial, but in a way, I'm looking at it from my branding perspective.
Sure.
If someone doesn't have a good flow to their talking, the way they talk, if they don't have good communication skills, if they're not moving at a good pace, if they're too slow, or they talk really fast and you can't really understand them, then my audience is going to get annoyed. Yeah. And I don't want my audience to have to be annoyed with something that I just didn't vet. So I try to look at that. And I've had so many people try to be a guest on my podcast. And you can tell we actually do have guests from time to time, but I am super picky about them. Super picky. And I'll even tell people who are like, well, you were on my podcast, now I'm going to be on yours. And I said, well, I don't have any guest slots open right now. And it's mostly true. But it's because I'm super picky about my brand. And I want it to be something that I'm going to say, my reputation is on this as well. It's not just that you're a guest on my podcast. And that's why I say to people, I'm your best guest ever, because I'm bringing my brand reputation to it. And I'm trying to up level your brand and mine at the same time. Yeah. But knowing that I'm bringing that level of care and kind of like grooming to it, if you will.
Sure. So we have a question that kind of goes with what you were just saying about, people wanting to be on your podcast, or turning, hurting people's feelings, essentially. Yeah. It says from Carrie Ann Wright, what is the best way to turn down an invitation to be a guest on a podcast, in your opinion?
To be a guest, I've actually been told we don't want you as a guest anymore after I've already applied, and I'm sitting there waiting on Zoom and they're not showing up. And I'm like, where are you? And they're like, oh, didn't you get our email? We went another direction. It's like, okay. So that's happened a couple of times, but I think that's kind of one of the easiest ways that, like, we're taking this in another direction. Or if they want me to be on their podcast and I'm just like not having it, or it's not going to be the right fit, I'm just going to say, I don't know if I have anything to offer your audience. And if they're like, no, you're perfect, then I would say, I don't know if I have time in my schedule right now. And I don't want to let you down by not showing up or having some issue where I can't make it. So let me see if we can look at some time in the future, and just kind of like push it out with, 30th of never, right? Like, so that they don't get upset, but that it's like, I can't do that right now, even maybe in the future. And I don't ever like to shut doors or slam doors, because that may be something later in the future. I've seen people's podcasts grow from something I was like, I don't know if I like that, to dang, they're doing pretty good. Like, they had some training, some coaching, something. And you can see that they've made this huge growth jump. And I don't want to slam that door in their face here when they're just starting out and they're trying. Then they get this training or whatever it is, and they're like amazing. So I've seen that happen as well. So
do you ever ask download numbers or anything like that?
I don't discriminate in that way. Because for me, I've seen people with a 2,000 email list, because I only have like 3,500 on mine. I've seen people with low email list numbers produce the most amount of money I've ever seen produced out of that, have the tightest knit group. They know every single person on their list, and they, like, personally, and they do better than some of these people with 1 million people subscribed, and basically no one's really listening. They're just subscribed. So I've seen things like that where, and I don't like it when people also say, oh, you can't be on my summit unless you have 5,000 to 10,000 people on your list. Why? What does that matter? Like, so I don't discriminate in that way against them, because I don't like it being when I'm discriminated against, because I have 3,500 people on my list. But then I've got like 6,000 people on LinkedIn. So it's like, come on. Like, that doesn't matter though, because I don't know every single person on LinkedIn personally, but on my email list, I kind of do. So.
Yeah. Cool. So we have some quick questions here. Of the 100 plus 140, were any of them in studio, or are they all virtual?
They were all virtual. Every single one of them. I wish I could do in studio, because I used to be on the radio and I loved that. So if anybody wants to invite me to their studio, I'd love it. That'd be so much fun. Or you can come to Florida.
Awesome. And then Andrew Knox asked, do you care about quality of audio? So when you're listening for that clip, you're listening to the voice, but are you also listening to quality?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have even listened to, I was on a podcast with someone actually. I won't name who it was because I don't want to embarrass him because he's amazing. But I was on a podcast with someone, and at the end, I said to him, I think you need to fix your audio. And he was like, what? I think it's good. And he was just starting out. He didn't really know a lot about it. And so he was like, I got this mic, and he's shown it to me. And we talked for another 30 minutes, me helping him fix his audio. And then he said to me, so can I be on your podcast? And I was like, oh, why did I do that? And so I was kind of like, how do I tell this person no? And so I said to him, I said, I'm really picky about what's on my podcast when people guest. And he goes, okay, I understand. I said, but you can send me 2 minutes and I will listen to it. And if it's not right, would you redo it? Because I wasn't sure. Like, I didn't know what he was going to come up with. And he's like, I absolutely will. And he's like, I want to learn this. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So he sent me the 2 minutes and it was pretty good. I was pretty surprised, but I coached him a little. I was like, when you do the 2 minutes, this is how I want you to do it. This is how far I want you to be from the mic. This is, all these things. I want you to have notes. I want you to, you don't have to script it, but have notes. Like, I just gave him a little coaching, and he actually did really, really well. It's in the list. I won't tell you where. So kind of, you can look through and see if you can guess who it is. But he was so coachable and like ready for that great feedback from me that I didn't feel like I was like, okay, you're not ready, but I'm going to make sure that you're ready. So it was pretty cool.
Cool. On that note, if you're, like Elizabeth said, if you ask somebody to guest on your show, likely they'll listen to a little bit of clip of your podcast. So just being ready for that and knowing that every podcast you produce might be listened by, a potential guest. Something to think about when you're talking about, like, are you going to master your audio or not, and how that is going out. Elias says, which were your favorite 2 or 3 episodes and why? Thanks for all the gems tonight.
I'm going to have to pop up my press section. Hold on, let me go back. So in my press section, I have all of them listed. I would have to say Talking Over Movies was really, really interesting. It's totally not about anything. It's like a Seinfeld episode. So if you're into that, that's what it's about. We literally watched Rear Window while we were doing the podcast, and we talked about business, but we mostly talked about the movie. It was very random. So that was really fun. And then probably one of my most favorite that I did that really brought out my story more was Finding Value After Trauma with Rick Jordan. I think that one was probably like top 2 or maybe the top 1. And then I've just had some really good conversations. Transforming Your Business with Profit First was really good. Any of the money ones that I've done have actually been super cool. The Virtual CMO was awesome. So I've done some that were like just fun. I mean, it was just like, that was a great podcast. But definitely Transferring Your Business with Profit First was probably one of the top 3 as well. So I would probably say, actually, they're all right in a row. Talking Over Rear Window, Finding Value After Trauma, which was Rick Jordan, and then Transforming Your Business with Profit First. Those were probably my top 3.
Awesome. I am seeing a lot of questions in the chats. I can see your questions better in the Q&A section. So if I'm not getting to your question, just put it in there. I'll try to get to it. I
see somebody asked me about my email list. I actually did it through my funnel. So if you go to my website and you click on Get the Pro Toolkit, that's my funnel. And I have different funnels all the time, but this has been my most popular. It's all the tools I use, including all my podcasting tools. All these resources are listed there as well that I listed today. And my email marketing, my social media scheduler, everything I use every single day is in this Pro Toolkit. And that's been one of my biggest ways to grow my email list.
Awesome. There was a question about audiograms and video clips done. Best place to get them done.
There's one that I know of that like does all this content for you. Like, it creates your social post things and your audiograms and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of it. You guys probably know it off the top of your head somewhere. There's one of those companies that like does that, and you pay like $30 a month or something for it. I don't remember the name of it, but I know, Headliner. Yeah, that's it. But I know that also Descript is now doing videos through descriptions, through the transcriptions. Yeah. And I was on a podcast called The Conversation with Kay Kamgar, and he did a video for that for LinkedIn. And I was just on that a couple weeks ago. So that was pretty cool to see that in action. But I do like that Headliner does that because I don't use that for my podcast per se. I do graphics separately. I would definitely recommend Headliner, but I don't personally use it. But I have seen a lot of people that do, and it's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. And I can kind of talk on this too, just because I do a lot of this repurposing for my clients. We don't use Headliner either. We do use Descript. Makes it really easy. We just take the clip. We have kind of like we use Canva as well. So we use Canva to put the video layout how we want. Then we take the video clip, we put it into that layout, and then we load it into Descript, and it transcribes, and it's a piece of cake. So Descript is actually one of our kind of sponsors or partners in the event too. So they have a booth. You can get started for free there if you go to the booth section and then go to Descript. And if you go through our link, just so you know, it lets them know that they, got it there through the Podcaster Summit. So it just helps us out as well. So if you go do that.
Someone asked me about my subscribers. I'm going to be real with y'all. Look at this. This is not good. I've had some down times here. I'm just going to be real. So let's just pull it up. Where does it say? Does it say subscribers on here somewhere?
It doesn't. I actually use Captivate as well.
Because it doesn't have it subscribers through here. It's like if you have to go to Apple or something to see that, right? Well, this is my real numbers, y'all. So I've had a down couple days, but it also is. I think our last episode was a guest podcast, and I know that those go down for me, so I don't do them as often. But yeah. So we'll see. I've got some good new ones coming up, so we'll see how it goes. But I see that this thing is like up and down all the time. So I don't even really pay attention to it as much because it's sometimes depressing and sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, we had 100% increase, which we really didn't.
When you get like that one person that will just binge watch all of your, and you get like 50 downloads in a day. It's like,
I have been on there before where it's like, you're number one in Russia. You're number one in India. You're number one. I'm like, and I was number top 20 tech podcast, top 20 marketing podcast in New Zealand a couple of days ago. And I was like, what the heck? I guess somebody just binge listened to all of my episodes in New Zealand. And the country's not that big. So apparently I was in the top 20 marketing podcasts in New Zealand.
Well, when you only have 2-minute episodes, it's easy to get through a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Mouthy Broad. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. What's your hack? Talking about Canva, I think.
Oh, I think she's asking Elias. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, I think that was kind of piggyback off of what I said with Canva and videos. Basically, my workflow is you put the Canva outline. So like where you'd want to put the video and then the surrounding background, you outline that in Canva. You download that as an image. You upload that into your video editor. You put your video on top of that and then just crop it so it matches with the image, and then upload that into Descript.
I see 3 more questions I want to try and get to before you guys leave. All right. So I saw one that said, do attending podcast events like Podfest or Podcast Movement, do I attend those? And then what do I hope to achieve from participating? I love attending events like that. And like this even, like this has been great, Jace. So thank you so much. Like all the kudos to you. And thank you so much for letting me switch, and all of you for being here. And even for Austin, thank you so much for switching with me, because I'm going to be on a plane tomorrow and I didn't know if I was going to make it. And so I'm so glad I got to be here with you guys tonight. And it is my birthday, so woo. But I go to these events because I like to share this story with you guys. I feel like this is so empowering that if I could get on 100 podcasts, like, come on, like anybody could get on 100 podcasts. And I can definitely tell you that it has helped me to hone my own message further, that I would never have been able to do this prior. Like I was a good speaker, but this was massive for my growth. And I don't know if you guys have ever done Toastmasters or anything like that. It was like I was in an intensive Toastmasters like pressure chamber for like a year. And it was great because my message was the same every time, but I could hone it and I could make it a little different each time and with each person and make it different for each audience. So it was very, very fun to do that. And then someone said, how do I work my CTA in for the guests? And do they get any pushback from hosts that do not want them selling on their show? I've had so many people say, and you're not going to sell on my show, right? I'm like, of course not. Now I can tell you right now, I've told you guys what I do. We create a year's worth of marketing in 5 days. You guys have seen me speak. And just be honest, you can put it in the chat if you want, but how many of you are probably going to like book a call with me? Like maybe, because you saw me speak. So even though you've heard a podcast from me and I don't actually sell you anything, I just tell you my story and here's how I did it and here's some tips, you're probably going to talk with me, right? So if I can get you on the phone, I could probably sell you about myself. So, so my whole point is that, hey, I want you to walk away with something. So then when you're like killing it on these podcasts and you're like getting on all these shows, you're like, you know what? That Elizabeth girl told me that. I wonder what else she knows that I don't know. And that's where I make my money. So that is one of the things that I don't need to sell when I'm on a podcast. I have 2 free things, my Pro Toolkit at the top of my site, my membership at the bottom of my site, and they're both free. And I didn't make my membership free at first. I had it paid. And I was like, you know what? I'm a dummy. I should make this darn thing free because that is my in. That's where people get to come and collaborate with me, ask questions, and be in my bubble. And then all I have to do is manage my bubble. So it's very, very easy to do that. But I definitely don't sell on the shows. I just am like, yeah, I've got 2 free things to give your audience. And they're like, hallelujah, I'll take it. So I just do that at the end. And then did I find it better to do solo podcast or have interviews made me grow? I think that my podcast is more just it's another piece of content, like having social media, because it's so short and I can do it so quickly. But being on interviews has definitely helped me grow personally, helped me grow my business a little bit, but also has broadened my audience and my reach far beyond what I ever imagined. And when someone hears me on this podcast they listen to, and they happen to listen to another one and I'm on that one too, they're like, she's on 2 podcasts that I've listened to? That's crazy. And being able to do that has been a huge, huge reach for my expansive reach for me, because someone having that kind of credibility where you're like, I was listening to this podcast and Elizabeth was on it. And then I was listening to another podcast and the same girl was on it. Like, then they kind of like, wow, she's been everywhere. And that's what people would say to me when I was here locally, just doing local stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm killing it. And now it's like an international thing. And that's really creepy. And I get goosebumps, but it's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, since this is the last session of the night, we can go right up to 8 o'clock. So if you have 1 or 2 last questions, we can definitely get those in. Otherwise, if not, Elizabeth, thanks so much for being here, switching on your birthday. I know there's a ton in the chat, loving what they heard and all of that. So do go check out her podcast, binge watch it tonight. If everybody listening here went and listened to, 30 minutes of her podcast, just think what she'd wake up to the next morning as a birthday present.
That would be my birthday present. That would be awesome. That gets you through like 15 episodes or something.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. I love this so much. Thank you so much for having me on today. And if you guys even want to book a chat with me, there's a book a chat button right there. I'll stop sharing my screen now. But definitely just book that chat with me. I'd love to talk with you. And thank you so much, Jace, for doing this. I so appreciate it. And I'd love to talk with all you guys.
Awesome. Last thing to close out the night. What are you most proud of in 2020?
Definitely the 140 podcast. But I would say that I think it's more for me, the accomplishment. So the fact that I did it, like I finished the goal that I had, like networking 3 times a day for a year. Like I did it, right? I can say I did it. It was crazy, but then I did the 100 plus podcasts, 140. And like that, just like being able to say that I've done that and having that little like checkbox on a little goal that was like so crazy. Mm-hmm. It just made me feel like I grew personally, because I would sit down at a podcast and I would do the interview and I would get up and I would just be like deflated. And my husband would be like, what's wrong? Like you sounded pretty good. And I was like, it was awful. Like I said this and I should have said that. And I just would reanalyze all of them. But as I got to do more and more and more, I would have some that I was like, that was the best show ever. That was like my favorite. Yeah. And then I would have others where I was like, no one listened to me. That person didn't like me. They were rude. They didn't even care, whatever. And so I went through this huge roller coaster with it. But I think that it taught me that it doesn't matter what the person on the other end is feeling or thinking. They could be having a bad day. They could be having their own stuff going on. It doesn't matter, because what I'm saying is relevant. It's important. And whether the person I spoke to heard me or not, their audience will hear me. And that message will go further than I could even see it reaching. So I had to put aside my own personal affirmation feelings that I wanted to get back, that feedback affirmation. And I had to say, this is for a greater good, if you will. This is for the masses. This is for those people I can't even see that are out there listening, because they need to hear this, whether or not this vehicle, this person I'm choosing to talk with right now, if they're happy about it or not, if they're dealing with it or not, they're listening to me or not, doesn't matter. It's going beyond them. And I need to think about that person who is starting their business, who is like, I can't do this. I don't know if this is going to be good for me. I don't know what marketing, I don't know anything about this. And then they hear my show and they're like, oh my gosh, she said I could do all my social media in one day. I can do this. Like, that sounds so easy. It's so accessible. So that's why I think I've grown much with that, more with that in the past year than anything.
Awesome. You blew my mind when you're like, a year's worth of marketing in 5 days. That, but it sticks out, and it's great branding. Again, thanks so much. Rich, I see your question. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. You're just going to have to follow along with her to see what's next in the coming year. So, Elizabeth, thanks so much. Everybody else, I am leaving the Air Me open. So you don't have to leave right now. You can go check out the booths before you hit your head on the pillow tonight. And if you want to stop in the lounge, I'll be in the lounge for the at least next half an hour until my son comes back. I have a 2-month-old. My wife was left the house for this, and he's coming back. So I'm excited to see him. But I'll be in the lounge until then. So if you want to connect with me, I'll be there. Again, thanks so much for being a part of the summit, Elizabeth, and everybody here.
Thanks, guys.